Most men want more clarity, more respect, more control over their lives, but few know how to get it. Welcome to the Bro Coach Podcast with Dennis Procopio, the founder of Man Up Life Coaching and the man behind thousands of transformed lives. Not red pill, not therapy, just the evolved man's blueprint for strength, presence, and purpose. I'm Andrew Bontz. I'm here with Dennis Procopio. Thanks for joining us on this Friday evening.
Hey, it's Dennis. I'm the Bro Coach, and I'm ready to talk about guy stuff. What do you got, Andrew?
So you recently wrote a blog post in defense of elitism, and it was a fascinating read to me. You talked a lot about some of the things you've been through, your history, but there was one particular part of it to where, as you're talking about elitism and kind of what it means to be, you know, because you call yourself on our website that we're an elite coach, right? And that can be framed by some people in a negative light. So I'm super excited to talk about your viewpoint and why you wrote this blog article and kind of catching the men up who haven't read it.
Cool. All right. Well, give me a prompt, man. Tell me what you want to know, because otherwise I'm just going to pull the string and just go for an hour, man.
So why do you feel like elitism, you had to defend it, right? Like why do you think that was important?
Okay. So here's what happened. It was sometime in the middle of the night. My family was sleeping. I couldn't sleep because I had this thing on my mind, which is in Man Up Life Coaching, I am putting together a group that is a combination of sort of a once every couple of weeks bro Zoom hangout, but also we have so much intelligence in our group. And guys who are either somewhere in between fin and tech, they are really the cream of the crop. And I made the joke on our first meeting that this group was going to be called the Mulk Men of Distinction. And it was not a free-for-all for anybody in the organization, but I was specifically carefully cherry-picking the people based on my knowledge of who they are. A lot of these guys are guys who have made a ton of money. A lot of these guys are guys who are really, really, really high above average intelligence, scary problem solvers, just computers. And they're also people who have significant AI experience already when AI is really only 2 or 3 years old. We're talking people who have created tech startups, sold tech startups. And I think it would be a really good idea to revive the old Man Up Life Coaching fireside chats, which is what we used to call our meetings. And I don't know what this is going to be called, but I know the guys I want in it, and I know what they have in common. And it occurred to me right then, you have a business that is called Man Up Life Coaching, Elite Life Coaching for Men, and you are now skimming the best of these men off of the top and putting them in a room together. So you are arguably making a decision about who the elite are of your group. How do you feel about that? And I didn't feel great about it. There are guys in my organization who are wonderful husbands, wonderful fathers, not especially great at math, don't have a whole ton of money, have managed to scrape together enough to pay for sessions, but they're here to learn how to make money. They haven't made their millions. They don't have anything that they're a master of. You know, they're not like, oh, well, let me just list my accolades. So I felt a fit of conscience putting together a group that admittedly was chosen because these guys were in some way exceptional in my group rather than average according to certain and specific criteria. So it led me to think about elitism and what I really mean when I say that, or is it maybe time after 13 years of doing this to change that freaking slogan, So that and my shoulders, barking because I've been swinging a kettlebell around lately, got me up out of bed, and I decided at midnight, okay, I need to write this. It's not going to wait. So based on your reading of this thing, and I guess if anybody's listening to this and they're like, I'd love to read the article, you can always go to manuplifecoaching.com/blog, and anything that any of our coaches have ever written is there. So what, Andrew, when you read the article, before I go any deeper into how I define elitism, what was your expectation when you saw the title? And how did it kind of throw you a curveball?
I mean, I think for me, it calls out, like, my parents raising me, kind of like they would, talk about the Rhinelander elite, like this group of people that made a bunch of money, that thinks their shit doesn't stink, that they play by their own rules, and that the rules don't apply to them, and their kids get special treatment and that kind of stuff. Just so, like, that word elite, in that context, and with, some programming that I'm trying to unwire that's attached to a lot of scarcity thinking in my life, like there's that, like, voice of my parents, that talks about kind of like the people with money, right? So that's as I looked at the title and kind of like ponder that was, for that, at least for that word, that's my reaction to, like, people who are, it's one of those things where it's like people, like, if they call themselves cool, like, I'm a cool dad, usually not super cool. Like, usually he's wearing cargo pants and hey dudes, and those aren't necessarily in style. He's trying to convince his kids that he's cool, right? So, like, or calling yourself alpha, like, I'm an alpha, and you're like, well. But
yeah.
So
I get it. The idea here is that you were raised in an environment. I'm born in Pennsylvania. I was not born with a silver spoon. I have an Italian family that, came here from Italy, southern Italy, and did well, but they did that as a group. Cue the Godfather music, and my mother is ethnically Jewish, although she, sort of would go on to renounce her Jewishness, as it were, and practice Catholicism as my father's wife. The moral of the story is my dad, even though he came from immigrant stock, these were still people who had the idea, we're going to come to America and we're going to make it happen. There was a tremendous amount of self-worth. Like, this is where I'm going to make it big. All you have to do is grind. This is the land of opportunity. And the idea was to, you have these names like the DuPonts and the Rockefellers or whatever, who are recognized as the elites, established, by their big war bucks that they made, during, the industrial sort of revolution and World War, I and II. So they're like, yeah, I'm going to go to America. The streets are paved with gold, and that's the land of opportunity, home of the free and the brave, blah, blah, blah. Right. And in the meantime, the true 1%, the actual elite, are, getting rich off of selling them the pickaxes and the shovels, you know, that they think they're going to use to get rich when there's really not that much gold left in those hills. My mom, being Jewish, we all know the term Jewish American princess. She, even though she renounced her family, she still maintained this sort of cultural air of entitlement. And so it was weird as a kid that I was brought up actually really poor, in an abusive environment where there were, you know, drugs and guns. And in my article, I talk about being physically abused and a victim of molestation and alcoholism and drugs and roaches and rats and fleas and, you know, kids dying from eating lead paint chips. Basically any, you know, gnarly, super white trash shit that could happen to a person. You know, that was unfortunately part of my childhood experience after my mom and my dad went their separate ways, and you know, it didn't work out. So what's my point? My point is I was always in the ghetto, or the hood, or, you know, whatever you want to call it, the street, but still with this idea from an Italian family who believed that they were going to grind until they made it and that they deserved to make it, and a Jewish mother who came from a family that had managed to stockpile wealth. I had this kind of idea that at some point I was going to get my comeuppance. So thankfully, I was an intelligent kid, and that's a gift. And I was able to apply my intelligence in school, or schools. In the blog article, I mentioned that I've been to 24 different schools. And yeah, I went to school with people who were super white or super privileged, you know, or both, but usually white because it was the 70s and the 80s. You know, with the one-off wealthy black kid or Indian kid or whatever, but it was usually white kids that were going on ski trips, that were, you know, their families were hosting foreign exchange students, you know, they went on vacations, you know, European vacations or whatever, whereas I was like eating Pop-Tarts or whatever, you know, like spooning, like, you know, Kool-Aid into my mouth, you know, for the sugar rush. And so somewhere along the way, my dedication to academics led to a full scholarship to Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art, which is a historic school where Lincoln made his famous "Might Makes Right" speech, which won him first New York and then ultimately the presidency. And Cooper Union was established by Peter Cooper to offer an equivalent value of education to anyone who didn't have the means but had the character and the talent. So it was an opportunity to get a merit-based scholarship. And somewhere between being a kid who got good grades when I finally shaped up and being a guy who learned how to draw because there was always a pencil and a paper around when I was hiding from abusive parents, or, you know, in an apartment by myself, or, you know, online waiting for the government cheese, I eventually learned how to draw, to some degree how to paint. And I had my crowning moment when I graduated from the Bosse's Cultural Arts Center in Syosset, New York, and went on to become a Cooper Union student. And suddenly, I'm in New York City. I'm in school with a bunch of rich kids because rich kids are the ones that are allowed to go to school for art. They're not in Votech learning HVAC skills, you know, you know, and so, and also their families are like donating big money to the school, which kind of greases the wheels and gets them in. So the next thing you know, it's kind of a rags to riches story. And I go from being this derelict human being to this talent phenom who was kind of an ugly duckling, didn't realize I was handsome, didn't realize I was in good shape, didn't think I was anything special. And the next thing you know, the pinky up crowd is saying, how much for your art? And I don't care how many zeros I added to that thing, they'd pay it. And I suddenly realized, holy crap, I have earned my right to be here. I have risen to a level of social elite status on the merit of my exceptionalism. And that is what Man Up Life Coaching is about. It's not about catering to rich kids. It's about offering anyone who has the drive and is willing to do the work an opportunity to learn how to grind so that you not only transcend average and achieve exceptionalism in your life, but also don't feel like an imposter once you make it.
I think it's a really key topic to talk about, to where discovering your exceptionalism. Because I think in today's world, there's a large group of men that may not have the self-confidence or the self-awareness to acknowledge where they're exceptional, and they haven't been encouraged or inspired, or like for me, you know, there's a lot of my life I've gotten to where I get because I'm talented, right? Where some things come a little easier to me than other people. But there's also that part where you don't necessarily want to let your light shine too bright, right? To where it's like, if I'm exceptional, then maybe I'm weird, or I don't want the attention, or, you know, you didn't necessarily have that voice or mentor or coach, for that matter, that sees that diamond in the rough, to, you know, quote Aladdin, right?
Right, sure.
So I think that's a fascinating topic, to where that you, as a coach, you have a very unique place to where you can see these exceptional men sitting across from you. And oftentimes you're in your own little head, you're on your own little blinders, so you don't see how exceptional you are at certain things, because it comes easy to you. It's super interesting to you, but, you know, other people, it's like, it's boring or dumb or nerdy, or like, hey, nice job, nerd, you know?
Yep. 100%.
That kind of stuff. But then now at this age, you get into your 40s and 50s, and you see these nerd alerts all of a sudden selling tech companies and owning a bunch of Bitcoin and and all of those things, to where it's like, my magic cards and protractor were actually paid me well, you know, a couple decades later.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And, you know, it's funny that you say that, because every single guy in my organization shows up with what I would consider obvious strengths. And he also shows up with what I would consider some pretty obvious areas for improvement. I'm always careful never to say weaknesses or deficiencies, because the male brain will hear that and latch on to that and never let it go. So from the moment I meet a guy, because I stand in my power as not just, my accolades. I'm Dennis who went to this school. I'm Dennis who graduated, was valedictorian of his high school. I'm Dennis who had a 4.0 in college. I'm Dennis who, as we've reiterated, painfully at this point in every time we meet, we have this tendency as guys to want to list out the things that make us valuable on paper so that we have high self-esteem. But self-worth is when you can walk into a room, no one knows if you're a multimillionaire or you're homeless, but your aura is just has a gravity to it, and people are just like, who is that? Like, there's a vibration that feels strong, like the force is strong with this person. I am not ashamed or shy about saying I am that person. Now, you're how tall? 6'4"?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a half.
And a half. We're not trying to cheat you out of that half inch, bro. You're nearly 6'5". Yeah.
I earned that shit.
Yeah, no, right. I get it. By standing up really tall and doing yoga. But so the reason I mention your height is because you must know, by contrast, like I'm somewhere between 5'10" and 5'11", basically a Jewish 6 foot. And I do not have the chip on my shoulder that some guys have about, like, where they rank in terms of height.
The Napoleon complex.
Yeah, little man syndrome. I'm good. I feel like I'm a perfect height. Like, it works. I've never had anybody complain about my height. I've never been somewhere where there wasn't a ladder or a step stool if I needed one. Anyway, but I've noticed. So my son Bennett was born with dwarfism. He will always stand out because of his deviation from the mean. He's an exceptionally short person. So immediately people are going to yoink, like sort of crane their heads in his direction and have something to say about it, because we have this tendency to want other people who are far away from whatever that comfortable average mean is. You and I have had conversations about how, as a bigger guy, you've experienced that same weird sort of othering, haven't you?
Hey man, stop spinning your wheels. If you're serious about leveling up your career, your relationships, and your mindset, it's time to man up. At Man Up Life Coaching, we cut the excuses and build discipline, confidence, and purpose. Book your free strategy session now at manuplifecoaching.com/application. Don't fill it out if you're not ready to grind, but if you are, this call could change your life. Man Up Life Coaching, elite life coaching for men by men.
Yeah, for sure. Like, oddly enough, that sometimes people see the 6'5", 240 guy as like someone they need to prove themselves against, or need to chip them down to make them look higher in the, the caveman kind of brain, or more of the immature middle school brain. Sometimes when bars or people get drunk, you revert back to middle school brain, where they need to challenge the biggest guy in the room because, whatever ego or whatnot is driving them to do so. But yeah, I've experienced that.
Yeah, there's an episode of The Sopranos where Tony gets sick, and like a wolf pack, the moment the the other guys start seeing him sick. They see it as weakness, and it was directed great. They start being a little bit more confrontational, a little bit more challenging. And so he picks the biggest guy in the room. He's like, "Hey, Muscles Marinara, you gonna, you got something you want to say?" He's like, "Nah, Tone, you fucking want something with me?" He's like, "Nah." And then he beats the guy up. And when everybody sees him do that, they're like, okay, Tone, we're cool. And he reestablishes his alpha status, right? So sure, anytime someone wants to prove themselves in a group, they're going to go for the biggest, strongest guy. So it makes you a target. Everybody knows that. Your group of guys walks up to another group of guys. The toughest guy in your group's not going to walk up to the little guy. Be like, "I'll take him." They're going to walk up to the bruiser, right? And so unfortunately, you're getting hated on. And I know you to be like one of the nicest guys out there. Like you don't act scary in any way, but people are going to see you as a threat. So what does this have to do with elitism? Well, I'll tell you. I was working with a client in Australia for a minute on the Sunshine Coast by Brisbane. And he's a tall guy, tall, handsome guy, plenty of money, eligible bachelor, but very low self-esteem. And one of the things we were working on was like, dude, I'm a musician, I'm handsome, at least that's what people tell me. Why am I such a pussy around women? And I'm like, I don't know, dude, but we're gonna have to work on that because you're wasting your good stuff here, man. You're a tall, I'm not, gaying out on you, but you're a tall, handsome, talented guy, super smart, great sense of humor, plenty of cash in the bank, you set for life type of thing. And you just need to work on your confidence. So when I would send him out into the world, I would send him on missions to go to a coffee shop and intentionally try to spark conversation with some, young woman that was in his dating radius that he thought was kind of hot or interesting or whatever. He would do this thing where he would shrink his shoulders and he would duck down, and he's like, I realize I do that, and it must come across as really sort of sheepish and weird, but in my upbringing, I was taught don't be a tall poppy because tall poppies get cut down.
Yeah.
Literally. And so my coaching for him is nah, fuck that, dude. If you're a bartender with big tits, you don't wear a sweater. You work what you got. You're a tall guy. Stand taller. Tower over people. And that's where we get to the shame that is often associated with taking ownership of excellence, which is where this started. So you said it's great that as a guy who comes from, Roaches and Rats, who now, is in the 1% for wealth, and who was an art fag in high school and college and somehow evolved to be a voice of leadership among not just men, but men, real Wolf of Wall Street, alpha warrior men. It's awesome that you're able to identify a guy's potential for greatness and encourage him to lean into that without feeling embarrassed or ashamed, because part of being a dude is some sort of humility thing you're supposed to do. Right?
Yeah, especially in the Midwest.
Right. 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 Like, and then the South, when I was in New Orleans, which I spent years in New Orleans, it wasn't only in rural Louisiana, but in neighboring states like Mississippi, Alabama, Mississippi and Alabama, really, that you could spot a Yankee a mile away, because they had no problem, tooting their own horn. Whereas a Southerner would never in a million years brag on themselves. They'd just let their actions do the talking. So, and it's sneaky. They'd be like, yeah, I play some chess. And then you'd go and get your ass handed to you in a high hat and come to find out they were the chess champ of their high school or something. And you're like, oh, you could have said something. Oh, I wasn't trying to brag. I don't know who you are. So one of the things that I have to do is I have to tell guys, look, dude, in this day and age, your personal brand is what you're selling. And if you don't have the cojones to sell your personal brand in a way that makes people want to buy it, you're doing yourself a disservice. It doesn't mean you have to brag. It doesn't mean you have to lie. It doesn't mean you have to exaggerate. But if you can deadlift 500 pounds, there's no shame in sharing that. You worked hard for that. Right? If whatever, if you took a test and were accepted into Mensa, like, hey, I'd like to share something that I'm proud of. And in a group of men who are truly loving, truly supportive, I'm not going to go, oh, that guy thinks he's better than me. I'm going to say, I'm happy to have a Mensa bro on my team because I might need some problem solved and I might need him to help me do some brain thinking. I might need that tall guy to help me get something on that shelf I can't reach. Like, we're a team. So we should celebrate each other's exceptionalism and we should all encourage each other to strive for exceptionalism. And when I use the term elitism, I don't mean old money. I don't mean, people who were born into the bourgeoisie, some sort of, people who are royals. I mean the athlete who had everything going against him and made it happen anyway. Yes, sir, you are elite. You're elite because you're above average. Alex Honnold, the dude who just, crazy climbered his way up Taipei 101. And more impressively, free soloed the rock face of El Capitan, like 3,000 freaking feet. That guy has every right to say, I am not only an elite athlete, but possibly one of the best athletes that ever lived. And you know what? I'd like to thank me because I worked pretty damn hard making that shit happen, and I'd like to thank gravity for not pulling me off that damn mountain and killing me. So that's it. So that's what I mean by elitism.
Yeah, it's a much different context, right? Because I think that if some people, they look at becoming elite or, they look at the tagline of elite coaching for men, right? To where they have that reaction of like, oh, you think you're better than me? Where it comes from a place of scarcity, right? Mm-hmm. But what you're talking about is like the true healthy masculine man where it's like, I have abundance, like I celebrate my eliteness in what I'm good at, but I also have the self-awareness to know that I need to surround myself with other elite men, because all that does is just elevate the tribe and elevate me too, to where it's like, okay, well, I can't be elite in everything, but I can kick ass in one thing, but fully aware that, maybe I'm not great at another thing, but I got a dude for that, and he's freaking awesome at it. And the fact that, like, you being great doesn't take away from someone else being great, or if someone isn't quite great yet, it's like, it's not a dig against you, right? It's not a threat, right?
Well, that's just it. That's just it. That's exactly it. So, boy, my brain goes in a bunch of different directions on that one. One of the things that immediately came to mind was, even though it's kind of a weird thing to talk about, like, dudes all think that if they had a, 8 to 12-inch dick, that they'd have, like, their life would be so great in some way. That's usually the dudes who are nowhere near those numbers that think that. And yet, there are the guys who are in that very, very small category, or large category if you want. But anyway, there are those, see what I did there? But there are those guys who are like, yeah, I was, I inherited my father's freaking fire hose. And, I'll tell you, it didn't really seem to make my mom and dad's relationship any better. They fought like cats and dogs, so I don't know what kind of value that ultimately added to the guy's life. Yes, I'm whatever, kind of hung like a pony. But there's, I've had good sex and bad sex. And at the end of the day, what's more important to me is being in a loving relationship. And I almost feel like sometimes it's a curse because, my girlfriend's super jealous. Whereas if I were just average, I feel like maybe she wouldn't be so worried about it. Like, you never know what somebody else's story is. Somewhere else out there is somebody who's got a staunch 5-incher that's like, I got a wife who likes what I'm working with, and we love each other. We've got 8 kids, and it's not really something I think about. And, women appreciate the confidence, and men have this tendency to be measurers. So there is a challenging dichotomy here. When you talk about elitism, on one hand, I don't want to suggest that you are only valuable when or if you demonstrate exceptionalism in some very admirable or utilitarian way. That is not the message here. You can be perfectly average in any way. Average height, average weight, average looks, average paycheck. And yet, your exceptionalism can come simply from having found peace, which for the religious may be having found God. For the spiritual may be, having achieved whatever the modern equivalent of enlightenment is. But when you hit Aura 9000, regardless of your earthly accolades, that too is exceptional. Why? Look around you. How many people are at peace? If you're someone, the rich is the man who knows he has enough, right? So if you're someone who is truly at peace and truly happy, consider what a gift and a blessing you are to the world. And that is a type of elitism, quote unquote, that I think gets slept on. And in fact, I have a client right now, really cool guy. He's living in China, white bro from Central California. Made his money in technology, is doing very well financially, or let's just say is secured, is young enough to be able to enjoy a happy life, and yet is old enough to have some wisdom. And he hired me in part because he almost has the curse of too many options, because he's, doesn't have kids, has a wonderful wife. They don't fight. There's no relationship crap that he needs to, preoccupy himself with figuring out. Like, they're like, yeah, we're just kind of living in, sort of, paradise of sorts. We like each other's company, and every day is just super nice. And there's money if we want to travel, and there's money if we want to stay home, and we can pretty much do anything we want. So sometimes being able to do anything turns into having anxiety that you're going to have overwhelm and do nothing. And so he said, some of the happiest people I've ever met in my life were in Bali. He's like, and I mean to tell you, these are not wealthy people. But it wasn't the grit of their daily lives that was the focus for them. It was a type of community mindset that made these absolutely the nicest people I've ever met on earth. And now, as a guy who's doing really well, my aspirations aren't to just continue to stack cheese, because my yacht needs a yacht or fucking whatever. My aspiration is to move to the next level and to recognize that this, for me, is what exceptionalism truly is. So that value shift is really important. So let's get back to elite life coaching for men. Yeah, I'm coaching guys making, a couple $100,000 a year who want to make $500,000. I'm coaching guys making $500,000 who are trying to hit that 1 million mark. I'm coaching guys who are making millions and are like, I might be in the conversation about potentially being a billionaire in my lifetime. I'm coaching guys who have ridiculously hot wives who are also as nice as can be. And then I'm coaching guys who have mediocre looking wives who are also as nice as can be, and everything in between. What do these guys all have in common? They all have in common that, quote, elite life coaching for men for them means I'm looking for a guy like Dennis, who at 55 years old has paid the iron price for both his knowledge and his wisdom, has the scars to prove it, has, like I said, licked the freaking last little bit of peanut butter off the spoon, unsure of when his next meal would be, put water on Cheerios type of thing, and is now the definition of successful. I want this guy to be my coach because I want to be exceptional. I want to be in the elite of our fraternity. And I'm not sure what that is, let alone how to get there. You feel me on that?
Yeah. It's that balance that we've talked a lot about and you mentioned it earlier, rich is the man who knows he has enough, right? Because I think that we've talked about this in previous episodes where you're chasing this thing that society or your parents or whatever told you was the definition of success. And then you see all of these billionaires killing themselves because they're so depressed and unhappy, or millionaires or whatever. So all of those, that balance of like, what is that, and definition of like elite coaching to kind of like, I would almost, there's one thing I value about you as a coach is you have an eye for talent. And you have an eye where you see people because you have such a diverse background, because you've been around all these different scenarios in your life, you can relate to people and see them where they're at, but you also have the context of seeing men that have done other amazing things. And you have this like Picasso painting of life experience, not necessarily all through your own lens, but you obviously have a large breadth there, but you have this connection to, 100 or so or more other men in the, over a decade you've been coaching, that you bring in this other breadth of experience and how you see the world. So at least for me, the being around someone that sees you but also sees you and loves you, that brotherly love way, to where it's like, hey man, like I see you and you're better than where you're at. Like you're not necessarily better or worse, but like there is an opportunity where you can shine more. And you're, that Mariana Williamson quote where it's like we're meant to, I don't have the whole quote in my head, but like we're meant to shine. We don't want to shrink our light so other people, we're worried about diminishing them because our light is shining so bright. So I think that's one thing that I really appreciate about you as a coach is how you see me, and also don't allow my own inner bullshit to convince myself. And that's the imposter syndrome, of course, but just kind of through my own lens. You don't allow, having a coach doesn't allow me to like hide behind my bullshit imposter syndrome of like, oh, I'm just this, or I'm just that, or I'm just whatever. And having someone has that life experience, both through what you've lived and, living vicariously through your clients too, it lends a really fantastic mirror, or at least sounding board, to show up as myself, but also knowing that I have someone that sees potential that I probably don't even see, right? And helping me accelerate it through that potential. And what I thought was potential was success, but it actually wasn't what I needed. It was self-worth, right? And my ability to, love myself at a level that I've never loved myself before, and having that sounding board and figuring that out along the way.
Absolutely. And it's funny because when I think about what that is that I do, like when you first started talking, you were like, you've worked with hundreds and hundreds. You said like 100, but like, dude, it's been like hundreds, like 13 years. It's been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Like I sometimes go through my, lists of guys that I've worked with, and I can't believe how many people I've worked with in depth, like to the level, like we're having one conversation that's already kind of deep. Imagine, an hour a day for, working with a guy for 3 to 5 years. Like that's a lot. And then multiply that by literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And there's this gift that I have this weird sort of autistic, and I'm not saying like, I'm not using autistic incorrectly. I'm saying I'm on the spectrum. I'm autistic and ADHD. I'm not to brag or nothing, but I'm wired differently. And so one of my freak superpowers is this memory. I remember things about people as though they just said it yesterday. And my clients are always like, long before ChatGPT or AI note-taking or anything, they're like, how the fuck did you remember that specific detail? I shared that with you like 3 years ago. I'm just like, I have a head for this. So how is that useful? It's useful because if you're someone who sees patterns, it really helps you in the moment when you're looking at a new guy, at a new client, to just there's this thing that happens where it's like, it's almost like cicadas going like chirping in my head. It's a picture trying to put itself together, and there's an intuitive aspect to it where I have to let it kind of form, but be careful not to project, because transference is a thing in counseling. And if you're not careful, you will project your own personal stuff onto someone else. Like, I see a tall guy and I say, oh, I bet you got picked on. He's like, no, actually, that never happened, or something. So in coaching, you want to be careful not to project and to predict, but you pay attention to the voices. And so when I work with a guy who's like a new guy, the voices, so to speak, will just be this rush of information, and it'll kind of almost like one of the stereogram images where you kind of have to relax your eyes and then cross them a little bit or whatever until the image finally comes into shape. It's like that. But when you know, it is undeniable. And so there are these moments in working with guys where suddenly they'll say the thing that makes me go, ah. And I'll say something like, have you ever considered public speaking? And they're like, it's so funny that you say that. I've always had this simultaneous interest in and debilitating fear of public speaking. And so we'll use that as the thing that is their kind of fear factor moment to sort of face it and take a risk, and from that risk gain self-confidence, right? And that is the kind of encouragement that a good coach offers. When you first started saying, hey, I noticed that you have this ability, one of the things I was thinking is there are some really good talent scouts out there. Like, I think about the people who are responsible for finding talent for shows like The Voice, which, by the way, is like, I used to watch the hell out of that show because I love the coaching. Like, I'm a coach. I like coaching. And it's so amazing. Or casting directors. Like, casting, like a really good casting director can just read everybody. Like, just immediately go, oh, no. You would be good for this role because and as a director, they'll kind of bring it out of you. Like, let me see your anger side. And you're like, I'm not really an angry person. Yeah, let me see it anyway. And they'll push your buttons, and all of a sudden you'll tap into some emotion you didn't even know were there, and they're like, you're the one for the part. So part of what I do as a coach is exactly that I sort of intuitively / like intellectually truffle out people's hidden talents. And once I find them, they're like, oh, I could never ... Case in point, you and I met on your podcast, Resisting Beta. And later you reached out to me and said, I'm thinking about it. And after consideration, I've been low-key kind of, interviewing coaches, and you're the guy I want to go with. I say, great. You and I start working together. I pretty immediately say, hey, I think you should be on my admin team. You're a marketer. You have you're a serious bro. You're reliable. You can help me whip my 28-year-olds in my admin team into shape. Not really, but kind of. And every step of the way, you're measuring your right to be here by whether or not my line is going up like a hockey stick. And I think one of the most important things that has happened in your time with Man Up Life Coaching is that here we are doing a podcast together. I very much regard you as a potential partner. in business, not like in a gay way. And but I like that shirt. but you look good in plaid, bro. Um, where's your brawny man axe, though?
Hold on, I'll get it.
Wisconsin. Say that for the after party, but not. But real shit. Like I'm waiting for you to realize you're an alpha boss and take Man Up Life Coaching to the promised land. You've had that experience with me. You've been along for the ride. I've been believing in you long after you stopped believing in you. Because as a marketer, you said, I'm going to do X and we're going to get Y. That didn't happen. And you're like, well, I guess I failed you. I'm taking my ball and going home. And I said, nope, that is not what's happening. You are staying. You are not allowed to leave. And you are, in fact, going to run my business. And you're like, do I have to? And I'm like, yes. Well, shit. All right. I guess I live here now. So speaking of working in an environment where we train men to be exceptional and where we don't apologize for elitism, how would you say that being in this environment has helped to change your mentality from shrinking Poppy, who's not allowed to stand up tall, to, you know what, we're doing the damn thing, and I am motivated by Dennis's combination of sort of David Goggins meets Robin Williams' Dead Poet Society, energy. How are you embracing the idea that not only am I refusing to be hateful toward the concept of elitism, fuck it, I'm embracing elitism. Yes, I am elite. I own that.
I think for me, it's been the combination of figuring out, like I mentioned before, how to love me as I am, right? Like knowing what my value is, knowing what, kind of building up that brag book of like, okay, well, yeah, maybe the numbers aren't there, but I can stand in my value and stand in my values of what I've brought to the table, right? And knowing that I'm showing up in something that means a lot to me. It's obviously one of the main missions of the podcast was to really impact men's mental health, and it had some pretty steep goals attached to that. In being able to, and now in more in this role, just being able to impact men and rub shoulders with men that are elite, right? And have completely different viewpoints on the world, and knowing that I can stand with them, right? Like I can stand in my value. I can stand in who I am as a man, and knowing that I'm good as I am, right? And I've done some pretty cool shit in my life, but I also have a lot of room and opportunity to grow, and a lot of my own crap I'm working through. And it's pretty amazing as you look across the table and it's like, oh, everybody's got their own, shadows, versions of themselves they're trying to hide underneath, in corners and stuff.
That's real. And I'll tell you what, put me in the room with the 1% of the 1%, and I will still show you someone who shits and farts, dude. You're not that elite. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, poop jokes. So, yes, pull my multi-billion-dollar finger. So the point is, to land this thing, when I say that I defend elitism, I mean that I defend your right to embrace being more than average, to strive for being exceptional, and whatever that is, A, you deserve it, but B, don't let it define you. Let self-worth define you, and let your pursuit of excellence be your signature. Right? Your defining character. I want people to know when I die boy, working for Dennis, I'll tell you what. This is a guy who did not let any punctuation errors slide in any brand copy. This is a guy who, if you tried to feed his audience AI slop, there is going to be some very passionate words in our private Discord server, because this dude is not about average. This dude is about excellence. And so if you're a guy and you're listening to this and you are someone who considers himself elite in some way, welcome, fam. Come holler. We're kind of cool too. If you're someone who thinks the elite are those guys, here's what you're doing. You're hating on them, and in doing so, you are your own barrier to entry. Don't hate them. Like, don't worry about them. Do you. Don't worry about what they have. Worry about who you are. And as you develop yourself, you will come into a state of, I would say, peace, grace, authority, and whatever the hell you guys think you mean when you say alpha. Trust me, that'll be riding alongside with you too. You'll be spiritually alpha. Okay. On that note, play us off stage, Andrew.
All right, man. We've gotten to this point in the podcast, so you actually obviously got a lot of value out of the conversation we had today. So I've got to ask you something. I want you to go on wherever you're listening to this, fill out a review, show some love so some other men can find it and continue to get the value and the blessings that they deserve in their life. So we appreciate you.
Did you guys hear his call to action? Do the thing he said. Come on, make him feel like he's an elite communicator. Push the button and do the follow crap or whatever you're supposed to do. Social media, yeah. All right, on that note, guys, love you, and we'll see you on the next one.